Today's guest, Taylor Dayne, will be appearing at Fallsview Casino on March 1st, 2024. Don't miss the opportunity to see this spectacular star live in concert. You can purchase tickets by going to fallsviewcasinoresort.com or ticketmaster.ca.
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is an iconic singer, songwriter, and actress whose spectacular vocal style and powerful range catapulted her to global superstardom in 1987 with her #1 debut single, Tell It to My Heart. Since then, she's had 17 more top 20 hits, including Prove Your Love, I'll Always Love You, Don't Rush Me, Love Will Lead You Back, With Every Beat of My Heart, Naked Without You, and two of my all-time favorites, Can't Get Enough of Your Love and Beautiful. She's sold over 75 million records, earned 3 Grammy nominations, an American Music Award, multiple New York Music Awards, and she's been honored by the New York Music Hall of Fame. And get this, both Rolling Stone and Billboard magazines have named her one of the greatest female dance artists of all time. She's one of the very few artists in contemporary music history to successfully cross over into almost every musical genre with hit singles in pop, dance, R&B, adult contemporary, and rock. In 2019, our guest released a highly compelling, insightful, and inspirational memoir entitled Tell It to My Heart, sharing her personal journey of turning obstacles and vulnerability into resilience, strength, success, and personal fulfillment. But in my opinion, the best way to experience our guest is live on stage, and lucky for us, she's currently on tour, playing to sellout audiences and getting rave reviews across the country. I'm beyond thrilled to welcome the inimitable Taylor Dayne to our show. Taylor, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my goodness, Harvey. That's one of the best introductions and most beautiful introductions I've ever heard.
That's because it came from a fan, me.
Art, thank you.
I want to start by mentioning that this is the 35th anniversary of your classic hit, Tell It to My Heart, and your amazing remix with Cash Cash went to #1 on the dance and radio charts. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, right? It's the power of a great song, It's a great song, and Cash Cash, they're such a great producing team, and they really just honored the classicness of the song and turned it out. Yeah. #1 record. Yeah.
Well, it's also an indication of a classic, spectacular singer, not just a great song. And you've had significant longevity on an international scale in a music industry that can be brutal. What's your strategy for sustaining that longevity in your career?
The strategy is you have to have the desire, you have to have the passion, you still have to want to be in the game. It doesn't matter if you're Tom Brady to this, they have to make decisions. We all have to train for this. I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not 30 anymore. I'm not 40. I train to be in this position, in this energy, and I desire. My fans, after this health crisis I went through the last couple of years, more than ever, the connection with my fans and actually doing what I do has become the healing process was so enormous for me. I was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2022. It was brutal. The recovery was brutal. The surgery was brutal. And yet there was a voice and as I talk about in my book, even from my 30-year anniversary, I say there was a pilot, there was a light, a hope flame. And I took it very gently with my fans, and they were just the most understanding. People genuinely want to hold and embrace. And it's led me to such a grateful space, such a loving space. This tour, the Love Me Tour, means for all of us, not love me, love you, love us. My single, Lose You to Love Me. I don't experience it the same way, Selena did. This is my version of it, and it's really about self-love and self-care, and, obstacles and challenges will always come. How do you fight through those? And then how do you get back on top? So that's my answer to you on the strategy.
Well, I want to tell you, Taylor, that you and I have something in common because I had that very same surgery in 2015. And I want to applaud you for going public about this. You are an ambassador for Fit for the Cure. You're advocating cancer awareness and early detection. Thank you so much for doing this, Taylor.
I appreciate that. Did you have symptoms? Like, this is the thing. Why do we go in for these pap smears? Why do we go for mammograms? Why do we go for these checks, these colonoscopies? I was 52 years old when I went in, and they found a lot of polyps, and they were like, whoa, red flag, red flag. We want to cut your colon out. And I already had to go, no. So this is why we do this early detection, these tests. So we stay in what's called warrior mode for ourselves and become our own fighters, because nobody's going to force you to go into those, get those tests done and do your mammograms and do your, colonoscopies. You must really take care of yourself. And that's what led me to Cole and Fit for Cure. They saw me on Tamron Hall, and then just talking very vulnerably. I was 20 pounds lighter. I mean, I was really coming out of it, as obviously now you've experienced it. And it was really something. My fans and people just, that's how Cole and Dillard's and Fit for the Cure came to Susan G. Komen, because they were like, wow, you have to fight through this. And sometimes you're so lucky if you have friends and family and somebody that can stand by your side. But oftentimes people don't. I watched a lot of people, and it broke my heart, but how to really go through the challenges of the medical and, just medically going through things that they weren't prepared for.
No, nobody's really prepared for it. Luckily,
right. Nobody.
I was lucky.
I was like, thank God I feel fit and I'm energized. And even it just took everything from me.
Thank God we're both doing well. I want to ask you, you wrote the song Whatever You Want for Tina Turner. Can you articulate what it feels like when you hear a great music artist singing one of your songs?
The feeling was incredible. It was also validation. I wrote the song for myself. It was for my third album. It was for Soul Dancing. And my record company just didn't believe in it. They didn't think it was a great song. They didn't think it was a hit. They didn't think whatever. And I co-wrote it with Arthur Baker, who, if you know anything about dance music and culture, and Arthur in the day, and Arthur really is the one that got it to Tina's people, got it to Trevor Horn. And that was probably 3 years later, after I'd already left my label. And when they released it, I think it was like 98, 96. And to hear Tina singing my lyrics, because I was like, whatever you want me to be, I will be what you need. And Tina Turner, like, for me, was my idol, was everything. Physically, emotionally, mentally, how she really overcame so many obstacles, but also watching her energy is what was one of my, so to hear her singing those words, and I'm like, oh my God, it was validating.
I can't even imagine. I remember seeing you in an interview where you were asked about your process as a songwriter, and you said it was like filling in the pieces of a puzzle. Yes. What did you mean by that?
Well, I'll collaborate most songs. I'm not like a singer-songwriter. I get in the room and I go on my guitar. I mean, that's not my thing. I'm not like Taylor in that genre. But I feel like I'm a songwriter when I come into the room with the people that I'm working with. When I go into a room, if they're giving me a track first and I'm just building the top line, we call it, the melody and the lyrics, I'm always like, okay, give me a couple of hours. Let me go into the other room. Let me see where I'm going. Let's see where I'm at. Let me see where this music takes me. Generally, I work with a producer/writer. And when it's pieces of a puzzle, think about it. You're telling a story, and there's pieces that have to fit just right. And some musicians tell it. There's some songwriters that have told it so simply and so truthfully for so long. And you must remember the simplicity of writing a song, but the beauty of a song that literally is the same reminder, but it also takes you back and you understand who you are. So that's, how do you tell the truth? So it was like a puzzle to me. That's how I always looked at it.
I've heard you say that one of your biggest influences as a songwriter was Joanie Mitchell. Who were your biggest influences as a vocalist, that voice of yours?
This voice is an amalgam, of, I grew up in the 70s in New York, and it was WABC. We had AM radio. Summers were when everybody had 7 radios playing around a pool. Think about that. In 1972, on the same radio station could be Karen Carpenter, Three Dog Night, but these songs, close to you. one of my all-time, that song, every time I hear that purity of her voice, to Aerosmith breaking with Dream On, to Al Green, to Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On. Like, you forget what, and this AM played everything. There was no genre, and it was top 20, it was top 40 radio. And so the Joanie Mitchells later on were when I was delving into my, I guess, that personal journey, the Crosby, Stills and Nash, the Neil Youngs, when I was going into that place where I needed the intimacy and needed somebody to speak to me as a young girl. And that was Joanie Mitchell, her words, she's being honored today at 80 and 75 in ways. I've always wanted to tell her that, like, what an influence, she had on such a young, vulnerable, really scared little girl.
Well, Joanie Mitchell and Carole King and Carly Simon, they all gave us our emotional education, and you do the same thing.
Carly Simon, oh my God, No Secrets, that album. Your Carole King Tapestry, that was just
mind blowing. But when I listen to you sing, the reason I asked you about the influences on your vocal style, I can hear a bit of Stevie Wonder in your voice. Does that sound weird?
No, not at all. I mean, now you're going into the actual. So my voice morphed. So what I listened to was this amalgam of all these incredible artists. So Stevie Wonder was like probably the first, when I turned on the first little radio I got from my dad, maybe in 69, it was My Sharia Moore, something like that. And I mean, imagine that voice. But then imagine that you hear Steven Tyler. Imagine that, Aretha Franklin then comes on, and, she hadn't had a record like in a while until it was early 80s. But again, I'm just saying, like, there was the voices were very interesting. And then you had this influence from this, the rock bands that were coming out. Obviously we had Pink Floyd, but top 40 radio, there was always an R&B element to my voice. There was always a lean into the soulfulness and a choice. But some of those first artists that really, like, it was Led Zeppelin for me. It was Bad Company, Paul Rogers, much more R&B influenced artists. And I leaned into that. And finding my own voice was when I started making records. And I started making records when I was, pretty young. And that allows you to develop your voice, find your style. And that was with Rick Wake, my partner,
And then when you were so young, I think you were 20 years old, you were singing in stadiums filled with 100,000 people because you opened for Michael Jackson. What would go through your mind when you're preparing for a concert like that?
I mean, you're not really prepared because overnight stardom, as they call it, which really you prepared those 19 years prior. And I was working so diligently. I mean, I came from New York, so I had every top club, every music venue available to me. And that's how I played and broke through. It wasn't like we had The Voice or American Idol. We had clubs, you had, record companies that were the big, the man, the building, and you had to get your music heard through them. Otherwise, it was never going to get heard. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. There was nothing. It's not like you shared music with your fans like that, unless you played nightly in clubs and things. And so I just started with original band. Like, my first band was called The next one was called, or Felony was the first one. And it just taught me so much, and it just shows you. And that's that outlier attitude. And it was my 10,000 hours. And there's no other way around it. You start with covers and people you admire, and then you build your own sound. And that's basically what happened. That's essentially how it happened.
Do you think when you were 20 years old, if American Idol and The Voice had existed, would you have entered a contest like that?
Maybe. I don't see why I wouldn't have, but like, yeah. I mean, at the time, I think we had Star Search maybe. But I didn't see that turning into a big, now Star Search was huge. Remember, we used to watch that a little bit. It was in the 70s, I'm pretty sure. Early
But you
80s.
didn't get a recording contract out of it like you do.
No. So my point was, I was strictly, I went so far as I was going through the Village Voice. The Village Voice was really the only way you could speak to another musician. That's how I got my first audition, I think, even for, and not an audition, but ultimately I produced, we recorded Tell It to My Heart. My father gave us the money to do that, but I had done 3 12 inches before that prior, because that was what was happening in the industry. You could potentially get a single and get radio to notice it if you got a groundswell at clubs and clubs and clubs, and then they'd play it at the midnight turns at radio. And then pretty soon, if people loved it, they'd pick it up and radio would put it on during their mix shows. That's how it went with Tell It to My Heart. And no sooner did we hire the promo guy to put it out, and we were going to, independently release it as always, like we had done 2 other singles, where there was like, we got a call. He was like, Arist is interested in this single. And that was what it was. So they signed me single option album. They didn't have anything else in the can as far as an album, but I had already been recording and producing with Rick. So we had already done demo work on Don't Rush Me, one of the songs that we ended up putting on the first album. Same writers with Prove Your Love for Tell It to My Heart, if you're kind of getting the idea. And a few of those other songs that we ended up throwing on this record that became Tell It to My Heart, one of these classic records of all time. But, it's an interesting story, and I think there was a lot of lessons learned, I think, by the record company, because there was no image of me. If you can find that classic 12-inch where it just says Tell It to My Heart, Taylor Dayne, it was wild.
Yeah, you really created your image in front of us all. And then in 2001, I had the thrill of seeing you on Broadway in the Elton John musical Aida. You got rave reviews. It was an incredible night. Would you ever consider doing another Broadway show?
Of course. I mean, that was written by Elton and Tim Rice. That was when, that was a 5 years in the making. I had actually been in workshop for Aida before all that. It takes five, the writing. And of course, Broadway was, what an experience that was. I really, the right role, the right time, the right place. Yes, of course. I mean, and of course, I was there during 9/11. And I lived in New York. I had an apartment in New York, and I was bi-coastal. I didn't have my children yet. So this was a very, very incredible time to be on Broadway. I think, right, we had, Aida was such a successful Broadway show. It was coming off of Lion King for Elton, and then the producers opened, and everybody was like, it was wild.
Yeah,
I was
it
like,
really was
I still
fabulous.
on Broadway. Yes, I did.
In 2022, you appeared in RuPaul's Secret Celebrity Drag Race as Electra Owl. You described that show as being like Glee on crack. Was it a lot more work than it looked like?
Of course it is. All those kids were dancers. Don't let it fool you. AJ's a dancer. AJ McLean from Backstreet Boys. I'm like, AJ, you just getting your freak on. The problem, and I love, RuPaul, and I love him, adore her. Just an incredible human being. And brilliant. But what I said, it was like Glee on crack, is because you're learning a new song, 2 songs every day, and choreography, and I'm not allowed to sing. So my strength is my voice. It's certainly not learning routines and moves. So I was like, yeah, this is crazy. But the fun, I can't tell you, I can't imagine how it took 2 3 hours just to put sometimes some of these wigs together. Just the incredible, the incredible design and effort that goes into putting a lot of these outfits and costumes, and of course, creating a persona, as a drag queen. Like, it's unbelievable.
Well, you turned yourself into a female impersonator. That was a first.
I was
And
an
I gotta
electric
say,
owl, baby.
and I want to say, in all seriousness, Taylor, since we're mentioning RuPaul, I have to say that as a gay man, your phenomenal support and loyalty to the LGBTQ community over the years is monumental. One of the things you did for our community that I just have to mention, in 2010, you released a song called Facing a Miracle, which became the official theme song to the 2010 Gay Games, where you performed in Germany. The song went all the way to number 9 on the list of the top singles in the world in 2010. You have such a strong sense of the power of your music as a songwriter and as a performer, and you validate and you uplift people. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have such a huge and loyal following, including within the gay community. And it means the world to us. I just want you to know that.
Holding my heart.
Now, of course, I have to ask you about your incredible performances as Popcorn on season 4 of The Masked Singer. You sang
Yeah,
some amazing songs. Did I make you cry?
a little bit.
Oh, Taylor, you sang some amazing songs as Popcorn. What About Us, Falling, Domino, Better Be Good to Me.
Got to be under a mask in a mask full time, that was during the height of COVID, and they allowed, very few productions to go back into, and they were so careful and so incredible. And when I got the call, I was sitting on a beach in Santa Barbara. I hadn't been on tour. Nobody was. The
What an
call,
experience.
yeah, I loved it. I mean, I went back this year and I was a guest judge, and I loved Mass Singer to the point where obviously Popcorn has become like one of their favorite. Like she was just such a, oh my goodness, I just loved it. I loved to play with her, and I loved the music, and we just had the best of the industry there because nobody was on tour, nobody was working. So my costume, from the costume designers, from pink to to lighting, to everything you hear on that show, it's just such top end, and it's really was a really safe. And yet I was in a mask, but what a gorgeous. And I got to, yeah,
I hope
really.
you know that your fans knew right away who it was.
Ah,
At
yeah,
least this fan did.
yeah. I mean, look, you're asking Robin Thicke, you're asking Jenny McCarthy. I also have, years and years of relationships with these people, but at the same time, they also put it through some voice code, or, they do some really strange things when you're on, but you're right. I think I started with, what was the first song I did? Was the Pink song, What About Us? What
The
about all?
first song was What About Us? Yes.
Yeah.
And then you did Falling, and then Domino, and then Better Be Good to Me. And by that point, I mean, I was on the floor. Like I thought, how could they not know who this is? Now, I got to mention your book, Tell It to My Heart, came out in 2019. For anyone out there who has not read it, you've got to read it. It was an instant bestseller. Taylor opens up about her traumatic childhood, many of the bumps along the road, Taylor, that you had to overcome to achieve success. Was writing that book therapeutic for you?
It was the craziest thing. I went on a book writing retreat, and I knew I was approaching my 30th anniversary, and I just read about this woman, her name Linda, and I was reading her blog, if that makes sense. And I said, I believe this woman could be a great ghostwriter for me. And more than that, I really want to take her workshop. And when I went and did this workshop with her, it ended up being like 6 or 7 women of us in Carmel, and we were really, wanting to be published. And more than that, I knew I needed to, there's one thing writing a song, but writing about your life and your story, and and when I sat with her, Linda, and just the more I got into the writing and the freestyle, I mean, really, it's about going within again. It's like writing a song, but you're writing this song, and my whole office here, which kind of had post-its everywhere. And it was really a breaking down. There was also Joanie Rogers was also at one point connected to writing the book with me, the memoir. And I have to tell you, it was daunting. And during the process with Linda and this book writing, she said to me, she goes, this is easily a 2-year process. And I really started understanding that, because you don't just, and now what would my story be now? I am so different than I was 5 years ago in the sense of what I've learned, what I've achieved, and where I go. So is there another book in me? Probably. But I'll never forget her saying to me, she goes, you are a person in the now. So we must take the now and also acknowledge the past. I want to do a TED talk with you. And I said, whoa. So that is how I ended up doing TED Talk and TED Women. That was the precipice before I did the book. So she goes, we can't wait 2.5 years. We need to do this. So there you have I guess you would call it that artistic, that was, spoken word / with music, where I wrote this whole piece, and that was my TED Talk. And that's really what shows you where I was leaning towards and going into the book. And it was kind of, I needed to incorporate music in it. And that's when I had Born to Sing. I'd written Born to Sing, and that ended up ending my entire piece for TED Talk. But it shows you, because it took about 3 years to put that together, 2, 3 years.
Well, in my opinion, just as a fan, I think that the process you went through of writing that book prepared you emotionally for what was coming in 2022. I really do.
I don't doubt that.
You know,
Because
and
I was laying in that bed and I go, this feels like I'm 4 years old again. And this is exactly how I felt. So alone. So you're more than vulnerable, just unwell, unloved, you feel unlovable. You feel unloved in a way because you're so sick, your body's fighting against you. And it's not like you can't have family and stuff there, but you just want to. To me, I don't know, it took me to my early wounds of childhood. So there was things I needed to continue to work on. That's for sure. And it
well, I
reawakened.
hope you get, I mean, really deep down inside, do you get the love that your fans have for you? Can you feel it?
Now I do.
Now
Well,
you do. Well, then I'm very glad I got to meet you and tell you this because you are truly beloved. Your book gave us a chance to become your friend in a way that your concerts had done to an extent. But certainly, you know, when I read your book, it was like you were sitting there talking to me. We were having coffee together. That's how you wrote. And I think that I just wonder if you could go back and talk to Leslie Wonderman when she was 20 years old. What would you say to her?
I'd hold that little girl inside her because what you're really seeing is even 20, it seems young, or 21, but I would hold that little girl that had that dream, that had that hope. And that's the girl I would protect.
How would you protect her? What would you say to her?
I'd be the adult. I'd be the person, as they always say to you, let that little girl needed protection. And and I wasn't as a young girl. I was my household was quite, I love my parents are still alive and more than ever because I've outgrown that. I've outlived that and they've outlived it. And I've had those moments to do the work and get in there and dig down deeply in my forgiveness and more than that. But, everybody has a story. My parents included, they're survivors of Holocaust. I mean, we can't compare our lives. And yet, if you stand around long enough, you get to sit down. And that means that's my philosophy. So I read that quote in a book once and I said, wow, that means, you're going to stay around. You're going to continue doing what you do best and get better and better and better at it. What my cancer scare did to me and what you've just done for me it's not only a reminder, but it's allowing oneself to receive, to be able to continue this reciprocity. And without that, you're pretty empty. So therefore, I take in all your words, Harvey, and I understand them now better than I ever have.
That's such a beautiful thing to say. Taylor, it's been such an enormous pleasure getting to meet you. Thank you for all the music. Thank you for all the joy you bring through your performances. Thank you for that healing energy that comes out of you in everything you do. I know how incredibly busy you are. I thank you so much for taking the time out of your tour to appear on our show. Our guest has been the incomparable music superstar, Taylor Dayne. Please go to her website, taylordayne.com, so you can find out where she will be appearing on tour at a concert venue near you. You can also follow her on Facebook, Instagram, X, and her very own YouTube channel. And if you haven't read that book yet, go get it now. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsafin, my production assistants, Rosa Puzo and Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.